Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, make sure to turn off the lights, put your headphones on, and prepare yourself, because tonight's story will stay with you long after it ends. This is not just a tale about grief. It's a haunting stitched into memory, clothing, and the very fabric of a family's silence. Tonight, we present to you the wardrobe that remembered her brother. A young girl wears her late brother's favorite dress. A simple act of remembrance that unlocks something far darker than nostalgia. As the threads of mourning twist into something unnatural, she begins to realize not all goodbyes are final. Now take a deep breath, because the wardrobe is about to open again. Let the story begin. I was only 19 when I became the man of the house. My father had been paralyzed after a tricycle accident, and my mother was long gone. The burden of raising 4 younger siblings fell on my shoulders. We sold salt for a living, just as my grandfather and my father did. It was humble, but enough to keep us fed. Our small wooden house stood on the edge of a barangay where people still believed in the old stories of spirits in the trees, swangs in the night, and curses sown into wind. Life was hard, but manageable. That was until she moved in. Her name was Miss Shoni. She looked to be in her 60s, said she was from the next barangay, but had to leave her old home because her son was reclaiming the land. She claimed she didn't want to live with him anyway, couldn't bear her daughter-in-law's tongue. So, she rented the house beside ours, the one that had belonged to Miss Doding, a kind, elderly woman who had died tragically just a month prior, stabbed in the heart while out at sea. Her body had floated for hours before fishermen pulled her back to shore. Now the house stood quiet, but not for long. Miss Shoni settled in quickly. She introduced herself to my father one morning while he was arranging bags of salt by the roadside. She was charming in a grandmotherly way, full of stories, jokes, and tales from her youth. My father, lonely and soft-hearted, warmed to her instantly. Within days, he began offering her free salt. She refused every time, but they kept talking, sometimes for hours. I didn't like it. There was something off about her, not in what she said, but in how she looked. Her mouth was tight, her nose slightly crooked. Her skin looked like wax stretched too thin, and her eyes didn't blink like they should. When she smiled, I felt cold. I tried to ignore it. Maybe I was just being judgmental. After all, she hadn't done anything wrong. But then the stories started. One of our neighbors, Mang Dodo, swore he saw something strange one afternoon. He was carrying a plank of wood when he turned down a shaded alley. He stopped when he saw a figure standing in the middle of the path. Said it was an old woman, her face hidden beneath a shawl, but her body wasn't bent or frail. It was solid, tall, unmoving. He greeted her. She didn't respond. He tried to step around her, but she stepped to block him. That's when fear struck him. He turned back without a word and ran. He told everyone what he saw, swearing she had hooves instead of feet. My siblings were terrified, especially Elena, who had nightmares the whole week. I started carrying salt in my own bag, not just for selling, but for protection. I made my siblings carry some too, just in case. I told them, half joking, that salt repels evil, that if they ever felt something strange, they should throw it. Imeng, my 15-year-old brother, took it seriously. The younger ones followed. More stories came. A tricycle driver swore he saw a strange figure on his roof at night, perched like an animal, crouched and watching. He said it wore a white dress, and when he shined his flashlight on it, it transformed into a bird and flew into the trees. Another neighbor, a pregnant woman, said she felt watched every time she passed by the old house. One day, she came running, saying she saw someone peering at her from the corner window. When they checked, the house was empty, but Miss Shoni wasn't. She had gone out for a walk and returned home later like nothing had happened. My father laughed at the stories, said it was all imagination, said the heat and poverty made people see things that weren't there, that maybe someone was using drugs. But I saw something shift in his eyes. Doubt, worry. He stopped sitting outside after sundown. One night, while we were eating dinner, the wind picked up sharply. Our curtains fluttered. The candle on the table flickered violently, then went out. The roof creaked, then a loud scratching noise. We froze. Imeng got up with his salt pouch, slowly moving toward the window. I followed, heart pounding. There was nothing there, but we heard the sound again. Above us, Jan Jan, my 10-year-old brother, whispered, "She's walking on the roof." I wanted to tell him not to be silly, but I couldn't, because I heard it too. Slow, deliberate steps. Tap, tap, tap. We stayed like that for an hour, not daring to move. When the sound stopped, none of us could sleep. The next day, I checked the roof. There were deep scratches on the tin, like claws had been digging through. That same afternoon, I told my father we needed to talk to the barangay captain. That night, something changed in the way the wind moved through the trees. It was heavier, slower, as if it carried secrets too thick to be carried on a breeze. The moment I saw Miss Shoni walking across the narrow alley beside our house, I knew something had happened. Her left hand glistened darkly under the moonlight. Blood, thick, sticky, and fresh. She didn't walk like someone in pain. She walked like someone retreating, like a predator returning home from a hunt. I ducked behind the cracked water drum near our bamboo fence and watched her slip into her small house without looking back. The trail she left behind was faint, but I could smell it. Metallic, warm, and oddly sweet. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't dare move until her door creaked shut and the house fell silent. I wanted to tell my father. I wanted to scream, but my feet were rooted to the soil. It was as if the ground itself didn't want me to bring that horror into words. When I finally returned inside, my father was still awake, sipping hot water from a tin cup. He looked at me with tired eyes. "You saw something again, didn't you?" he asked without waiting for an answer. I sat down, trying to steady my voice. Her hand. There was blood. He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached behind him and pulled out a pouch of coarse salt from under the table. "It's time we tell the others," he said. "This isn't just stories anymore." That was the night my father stopped pretending he didn't believe me. The next morning, the sun came out in full force, casting a brightness that almost made me doubt what I had seen. Almost, but not quite. Rumors spread quickly. The man who was attacked, the one who'd escaped the witch the night before, was found lying near the barangay boundary, half conscious and muttering in fear. He had scratch marks on his ribs and bruises shaped like fingers on his throat. His wife said he hadn't stopped shaking since they brought him home. More and more people came to our little shop, buying salt like it was rice. My siblings helped pack small paper sachets while my father counted coins with trembling hands. Every few minutes, he glanced at the window. "She knows we know," he said to me once, barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. I knew it too. That evening, I didn't sleep. I stayed by the window, the salt pouch clenched in my hand. At around 2 in the morning, I heard the sound again. Footsteps on our roof, slow and deliberate. Not a cat, not a person, something in between. I crept outside with my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The air was unnaturally still. Then I saw her on our roof, crouched like some twisted creature. Her long hair tangled in the wind, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. She was watching us sleep. I held up the salt and threw a handful toward her. She hissed, yes, hissed, and leapt off the roof, vanishing into the shadows. I stood frozen for a full minute before running back inside. That was the last straw. The next day, my father called for a meeting. He invited a few brave men in the barangay, the same ones who had tried to chase the witch but failed. This time, there would be a plan. We would patrol in turns, armed with salt, torches, and blessed medals from the local priest. No more relying on hearsay. We would face her together. We began that very night. I joined the second patrol group, assigned to the area near Miss Shoni's house. Her windows were shut, curtains drawn, lights off, but no one believed she was asleep. "She's watching us," said Noel, one of the older teens from a few blocks away. "She's waiting for us to make a mistake." I didn't answer. I was too busy looking at the trail near her house, the faint remnants of blood, now dried, leading to a patch of disturbed soil. "She buried something," I muttered. "What?" Noel asked. I knelt and dug a little with my bare hands, feeling the damp earth cling to my skin. Just a few inches down, I touched something cold, pulled it up. A bone. Not from a chicken, not from a pig. Human. Everyone went silent. One of the men, Mang Elmer, crossed himself. We have to report this to the priest. No, I said. We can't alert her yet. Not until we know how to fight her. I didn't know why I said it, but it felt right. The following night, I dreamt something horrible. I was standing inside Miss Shoney's house, but it was not the small, wooden shack I'd seen every day. Inside, it stretched endlessly like a cave, with walls made of roots and flesh. Her voice echoed through the darkness, whispering my name. Enrico, Enrico, you should have left it alone. I turned around and saw her face, half woman, half beast, her mouth filled with sharp black teeth, her eyes empty holes. She reached out to grab me, and I woke up screaming. My father ran into my room, shaking me awake. Was it her? He asked. I could only nod. She's inside your head now, he said. She's not just a witch. She's something older. Older. That word haunted me for the rest of the day. That evening, I returned to the patch of soil with 2 others. We dug more, found a second bone, then a third, then a piece of cloth, military fabric, like from a soldier's uniform. I remembered the story of Grandpa Adu and the ghosts of soldiers. Could it be? That's when I found the pendant. It was silver, tarnished, and warm to the touch, too warm. I dropped it instantly. Noel picked it up with a stick and placed it in a cloth pouch. We're bringing this to the albulario, he said. We did. The albulario, an old man named Mang Tooting, was silent as we handed him the pendant. He didn't touch it. He stared at it and whispered prayers under his breath. This is not just a witch, he finally said. This is an Alupihin Ingdalim, an ancient being that feeds on fear and blood. He looked straight at me. She has marked you. From then on, I felt it. Wherever I went, I felt eyes watching me. I heard whispers in the wind. I saw shadows that didn't belong to anything alive. My siblings became quiet. Even Mick, the youngest, stopped laughing. My father began sleeping with salt under his pillow and a crucifix in his hands. We knew the war had begun, and I was at the center of it. My name is Rayson, and I thought the witch's curse left our town when Miss Shoney vanished. But I was wrong. Sometimes evil doesn't leave, it hides. It waits, and when it comes back, it wears a different face. We never thought that after all the salt, after all the prayers, evil would return through someone we welcomed into our home. It began with my older brother, Roylon. He used to be cheerful, always fixing broken bicycles for the kids, helping out with money whenever my parents needed a refill of cooking gas or a doctor's fee. But all that changed when Karai entered his life. First, she was polite, smiled a lot, too much actually, the kind of smile that felt like it was hiding something. But we gave her a chance. People change when they fall in love, we told ourselves. But Roylon changed too much. He stopped eating meals with us. He stopped looking us in the eye. Whenever we asked for small help, just a few pesos for the week, he snapped. My mother cried once. My father nearly hit him another time. And all the while, Kirai just stood there in the corner, silent, always watching. Things took a darker turn when his work uniform disappeared. My mother asked where his greasy clothes had gone. His oil-stained pants, his torn jacket, those were important to him. He said Karai offered to do the laundry. We found that odd. Roylon always did it himself. He said no one else could scrub the stubborn stains the way he liked, but he let her wash them. After that, it was like something else crawled inside my brother's body. He slept too much, ate too little. He grew thinner. He stopped laughing. He barely spoke. His eyes, once full of mischief, looked hollow. And when we asked what was wrong, he only said, I'm just tired. We didn't know what Karai was doing. We only knew something was very wrong. One night, a neighbor came to visit. He said he had a friend who lived near Karai's place. And according to that friend, Roylon was no longer himself. He would stand still for hours staring at a wall. He would eat food without chewing, just swallowing like a machine. And worse, he barked. Yes, barked. My father's face turned pale when he heard that. My mother burst into tears. She couldn't believe it. "That's not our son," she said. "That's something else inside him." That's when my grandmother stepped in. She had lived through the old times, when Aswang still flew in the dark, when witches poisoned water wells, when shadows had names. She said one sentence that changed everything. "Karai is not just controlling your son. She's feeding on him." We followed her instructions exactly. First, we found a piece of white cloth. We wrote my brother's full name in charcoal. My father wrapped it tightly with coarse salt. Then we sealed it in a bottle filled with holy water. We placed it at the east side of the house, the wall that received the morning sun first. The next day, nothing happened. But on the third day, Roylan came home. He was barefoot, his shirt torn, his lips dry and cracked. He looked like a man who had walked through fire. He said nothing at first. He just collapsed into my father's arms and cried. Karai hadn't let him leave. She had taken his wallet, his phone, even his shoes. She told him if he left, she would curse the whole family. And my brother, God bless him, believed her, because she didn't just scare him, she controlled him. We took him to the nearest albulario we trusted, Mang Aloes. He checked Roylan's back, his tongue, his fingernails. He said he saw signs of Usog. But worse, there were dark fingerprints under his armpits, marks only seen when someone had been fed on by a spirit. Karai, he said, was no ordinary woman. She's a Salabutan, he said, one of the hidden ones. They attach themselves to men, suck their spirit dry, then leave their victims empty, like coconut husks. We stayed up all night guarding Roylan. My mother put salt around his bed. My grandmother tied a red string on his wrist. I held a BOLO under my pillow. That night I dreamed of Karai. She was floating outside our window, her hair swaying like underwater vines. Her mouth opened unnaturally wide, and her voice was deep. "He's mine." I woke up choking, and the string on Roylan's wrist had snapped. We knew we couldn't let her near him again, so my father arranged for my brother to leave town, stay with our relatives by the sea. Salt water, according to Mang Aloes, would block the link between the Salabutan and its prey. It worked. For weeks, nothing happened. Roylan recovered. He gained weight. He smiled again. He started calling my mother Nene again, not just Tay. One afternoon, he told us everything. That Karai would mix strange oils into his food. That she had bottles with worms and tree roots floating in black liquid. That she talked to the shadows in her house. That once, just once, he saw her reflection in the mirror smile, while her real face stayed still. He said he wanted to leave so badly, but every time he packed his things, he'd forget why. It was like a fog would fall over his mind. He said the last thing he remembered was the night he burned his uniform in a fire pit she dug herself. She said I had to let go of my past, he whispered. She said, my family was my past. After that, we never saw Karai again. Her house was abandoned. Someone said she left for Manila. Others say they saw her walking into the forest at dawn, barefoot, carrying a bag of bones. But one thing was clear. That cursed bottle with the name, salt, and holy water saved my brother's soul. And just when we thought we were safe, just when we believed our family was whole again, we found something under Roylan's bed. A cloth, tied with black thread. Inside was a tooth. Not his, not human. It had been nearly 2 weeks since the night we surrounded Shoni's house and failed to catch her. The stench of old earth, blood, and something sickeningly sweet still lingered around her nipa hut even though no one had seen her since. Her windows were always shut, the wooden panels nailed tight. Yet people whispered about hearing footsteps from within or catching a glimpse of pale fingers slipping through the slits of bamboo. I kept telling myself she was gone, vanished, but deep down I knew something more sinister was brewing. The nights grew more restless. A chill had settled in the air. It wasn't the kind that came with the Amihan wind from the northeast. No, this one seeped into your bones, made your breath short, and your dreams full of dark silhouettes. That evening, my father brought back 2 bags of salt from the nearby town of Santiago. Not just ordinary rock salt, but coarse, gray, unrefined salt said to have been harvested during the Holy Week. The albulario he consulted insisted that only that kind could hold back something like her. My siblings helped him pour a line across every threshold, every window, every corner. He even sprinkled some inside our pillows and kitchen jars. As we worked, my younger sister Lita asked, "Why salt, Kuya?" I glanced at her. Her eyes were wide, not with innocence, but with the dull fear that only children feel when they know adults are hiding something. "Because it burns her," I whispered, "and she knows it." That night, I was determined to sleep. I wrapped myself in a thin blanket despite the heat, hoping it would shield me from the shadows pressing against the window panes. But sleep never came, not truly. Around midnight, I was awoken by the sound of crunching gravel. Footsteps. I held my breath and listened. There were no dogs barking. That made it worse. I crept toward the window and peeked through the bamboo slats. The street lamp flickered, then died, leaving only the moon to light the dusty road. And there she was, Shoni, standing in front of our gate. She wasn't wearing her usual faded duster. She was barefoot, her feet blackened with soil and blood. Her white hair cascaded in front of her face like wet threads, and in her hand, she clutched a bundle wrapped in banana leaves. I ducked, my heart hammered in my chest. I reached for the pouch of salt under my pillow and slowly made my way to my father's room. But when I opened the door, I froze. He was gone. His bed was still warm. The salt line near the window broken. I woke Lita and the boys, whispered for them to stay inside and lock the door from the inside. I grabbed my father's BOLO from the wall and followed the broken salt trail out the back door. The trail led me behind our house, toward the rice fields. It was almost beautiful in a grotesque way. Mist rolled along the mud like spirits dancing. The moon hung low, blood orange and swollen. That's when I saw him, my father. He was kneeling in front of a mound of earth, an unmarked grave I had never seen before. Shoni was beside him, pressing the banana leaf package against his chest. He didn't resist. He looked dazed. I ran. "Tay!" They both turned. She smiled. Her teeth, they weren't human. Jagged like broken shells, brown at the edges. Her eyes glowed faintly, like the dying embers of coal. "You should not have followed," she said in a voice that wasn't hers. Sounded layered, hers and something deeper, older. I held out the BOLO. She laughed. The sound echoed across the fields. "Do you think your iron can harm me, boy?" I took a step forward. "But salt can." I dipped my hand into the pouch and threw a handful at her. She screamed, not like a woman, more like a pig being slaughtered. The banana leaves burst into flame in her hands. My father collapsed. I rushed to him and dragged him back as she writhed on the ground, her skin smoking. We ran. When we reached the house, I bolted the doors and reinforced the salt lines. My father didn't speak for hours. When he did, all he said was, "She made me bury it." "What did she make you bury?" He looked at me, eyes wet. "Something she fed with our blood." That night, none of us slept. Even the dogs were silent. By morning, I made a decision. We had to dig up what was in that mound. Whatever it was, if it fed on blood, it would come back. Or worse, grow stronger. I gathered 3 of our neighbors, those brave enough to believe me, and we walked to the unmarked grave with bags of salt and gallons of holy water. The digging took hours. What we unearthed was no corpse. It was a bundle of dolls. 3 of them, made of bones, animal hair, and human fingernails. And beneath the dolls was something wrapped in cloth. It was still breathing. I wish to God I never looked closer. Its eyes, they were stitched shut. Its mouth sewn into a permanent grin. But it was alive. We burned it. All of it. But I know it wasn't enough. That night, Shoni's house burned to the ground. No one knew how, or pretended not to. But every now and then, someone hears knocking on their door at midnight. They say if you sprinkle salt before you open it, you might still be safe. If not, you better pray you didn't bury anything in your yard, because she might be coming to feed. It had been weeks since I last touched any of Shai's clothes. I thought avoiding them would bring peace back into my body. But every night, As I lay on my mat staring at the dim glow of the hallway light leaking under my door, I could feel them calling to me. Not with a voice, not with words, but with something deeper, like hunger, like grief that had rotted into something darker. First, I thought it was only in my head. After all, grief does strange things. It plays with the corners of your vision. It makes you reach out to empty space at night, half asleep, thinking you're pulling back someone who's long been buried. But this wasn't like that. The dress, the blue one I had worn to Papa's birthday service, still hung in Shai's wardrobe, and sometimes I would find it swaying gently, as if someone had just walked past it. Even though the windows were closed, I told myself to be strong. I reminded myself of the promise I made to myself and to Shai. I would not wear his clothes again. But that night, the wind howled outside. The type of wind that carries dust and voices. Couldn't sleep. The itch had come back. Not on my skin, but inside it. Like ants burrowing beneath. I got up, barefoot, and walked to his room. The air in there was still, heavy, like the silence of a church just before a storm breaks. I reached out and touched the wardrobe handle. It was cold. Pulled it open. The blue dress was still there, wrinkled from the last time I crumpled it in panic. But it looked cleaner than it should have. Brighter, almost glowing in the faint light of the moon filtering through the window slats. I touched it. I didn't mean to wear it. I only meant to feel it, to remember. But my fingers gripped it too tightly, and soon I was slipping it over my head, just to see if the itching would start again. Didn't, at least not at first. Instead, I felt calm, like the moment right after you cry. My heartbeat slowed, my breathing softened, and then I heard it, the faintest sound. A whisper came from behind me. At first I thought it was the wind, but the window was closed. Then I thought it was Aunt Dahlia again, watching me like that night in the kitchen. But the room was empty. I turned slowly to the mirror, and there it was. The dress wasn't reflecting properly. I could see myself, yes. My foto, my arms, my legs. But the dress, where it should have been, was something else. Something darker, a silhouette, and not mine. I stepped closer to the mirror. The silhouette inside the dress. It moved independently of me. It shifted like a shadow, but it wasn't mine. It leaned forward even though I hadn't moved. His head tilted, then snapped to the side. I fell backward in fear, crashing into the nightstand. The lamp flickered and died. I ripped the dress off, screaming, and ran back to my room. I didn't care if Aunt Dahlia saw me. I didn't care if Papa scolded me. I wanted that thing off me. For the next few days, I avoided the room completely. I wouldn't even pass by the hallway unless it was daylight. But the damage was done. The whispers came anyway. First, it was just at night. Then, during the day too. Sometimes while I was eating. Sometimes while I was at school. They weren't words, exactly. Just sounds. Hissing. Cracking. Wet syllables that had no meaning but felt like they did. Like something trying to speak through a mouth that no longer remembered how. I tried telling Papa. He said it was grief. That I needed rest. That maybe we should see someone in town. But he didn't mean a doctor. He meant the albulario. I agreed. Anything to stop the voices. The next morning, we traveled to the edge of Paglaranda, where an old woman named Taya Simong lived. They said she was once a midwife, but now she mostly helped with spirits. Papa explained everything while I sat in silence, clutching the hem of my shirt like it was the last thing keeping me tethered. Taya Simong didn't say much. She only stared at me for a long time. Her eyes were almost completely white, but somehow I felt her seeing straight through me. "She's wearing death," she finally said. Papa asked what she meant. "She borrowed the skin of someone who hasn't fully left," she whispered. "And now he wants to finish wearing her." Papa didn't understand. I didn't either, but she took out some herbs, oils, and salt, and performed a short cleansing ritual. She said we had to burn the dress, that no trace must remain. So that afternoon we did, in the backyard with dry coconut husks and a box of matches. The flames licked the fabric greedily, and just when the hem caught fire, I heard it. A scream, faint, like it came from underground. But Papa heard it too. He looked at me with eyes wide in horror. The flame burst suddenly and we both stumbled back. The fire turned blue for just a second, just long enough for us to see a face in the smoke. Shai's, twisted, not like how he was in life, but like how a soul looks when it's caught between this world and something much worse. Then the fire died. The dress was gone, but the whispers weren't. That night, I dreamt of him again. But this time, I wasn't in the dream. I was watching it. Shai was standing in our house in the hallway. The walls were covered in salt and ashes. He was crying, but not like before. Not tears of fear or sadness. These were of anger. He looked straight at me even though I wasn't there. And then I heard it. His voice. Why did you burn me? I thought the fear had passed the moment I stopped wearing Shai's clothes. For several days, I lived in an awkward silence that blanketed the house like dust on old furniture. There was no more itching, no more dreams, no more night visions of Shai's pale figure standing in corners or whispering from the walls. And for a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe it was over, that grief had taken a strange form and had now finally subsided. But I was wrong, terribly wrong. It started subtly. One night, while I was brushing my hair in front of the mirror, I noticed something unusual on my collarbone. A faint imprint, almost like the edge of embroidery. At first, I dismissed it as a rash from my old bedsheet. But the next morning, the pattern was darker, more defined. It resembled stitching, perfect rows of threads embedded into my skin, forming a delicate yet terrifying motif that I couldn't understand. I covered it with my school scarf, not wanting Aunt Dahlia or Papa to see. I even avoided looking at it myself. But no matter how I tried to ignore it, I could feel it tightening every day, like a thread slowly being pulled from within my bones. It itched when I smiled. It ached when I cried. By the 5th day, the stitching had spread. It slithered down to my arms, around my ribs, then toward my back. When I tried to scratch it, I didn't find skin, just something tougher, something fabric-like. I was horrified, felt as if my body wasn't mine anymore, as if Shai's clothes, long removed, had never truly left me. They had found another way to cling. I returned to the old closet in his room, something I had promised myself I would never do again. The scent hit me first. It wasn't the familiar detergent smell anymore, nor Shai's cologne. It was thick, like wet cloth sealed too long in a coffin. The air was humid. I hesitated, then slowly opened the wardrobe. Everything was still neatly arranged. Dresses, pants, blouses, even the hat he wore when he visited the hospital. But now each piece looked worn, not with time, but with something else. They pulsed, faintly, as if breathing. That's when I saw it. The light blue dress, the one I had worn to Papa's birthday worship. It was hanging by itself, in the center of the wardrobe, as if waiting for me. I stared at it, frozen. Then something inside me shifted. My head throbbed. My stomach churned. Suddenly, I heard Shai's voice, clear and crisp, as if he was whispering into my ear. You never gave it back. I spun around. No one. I was alone. But the mirror in the corner flickered, and in its reflection I saw myself, not as I was, but wearing the dress. The stitching along my collarbone glowed red. I screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over a stool. Aunt Dahlia came rushing in. Her eyes darted to the closet, then to me. She didn't say anything at first, but her face turned pale. She saw the marks on my arms, the threads, the pattern. She didn't ask me questions. Instead, she did something unexpected. She pulled me by the wrist and dragged me out of Shai's room. She locked the door and told me not to step inside again, not even in daylight. That night, she confessed. She had never told me or Papa, but ever since Shai passed, she had dreams. In them, Shai wasn't himself. His body was stitched together, sewn with parts of garments, his smile stiff like cloth pulled too tight. He would tell her that he wasn't ready to leave, that he needed someone else to finish what he started, that his skin wasn't enough. And now it was happening. To me, Aunt Dahlia wept. She said it might have been her fault, her denial of grief, her refusal to bury all of Shai's things, her insistence on preserving his memory in cloth and closet. She said she should have burned the wardrobe, but it was too late. The clothing had chosen me. Over the next few days, I could barely function. I didn't go to school. I didn't eat much. I locked myself in my room, where I watched the threads grow. I could no longer feel my chest. It felt padded, cushioned like cotton. My hands had become stiff, like gloves stretched over cold wire. When I moved, I creaked. I begged Papa to take me to a doctor, but he was confused. He didn't see anything. To him, I looked fine, just pale and tired. I realized then, only Aunt Dahlia and I could see it, because only we had seen the full grief of Shai. Only we had touched his absence too deeply. Aunt Dahlia tried everything. Salt in the corners, holy water, candles lit with midnight prayers. But nothing worked. The final blow came one evening when I coughed and a button fell from my mouth. A real button, round, blue, the same as the ones on the light blue dress. I collapsed on the floor, weeping. That night, I finally agreed to see the albulario, an old woman named Sionang who lived 2 barangays away. Aunt Dahlia carried me on her back as I shivered from the chill of the stitching beneath my skin. When we arrived, Sionang did not greet us. She just stared. Her eyes were sharp, ancient. She motioned for me to sit, then began muttering incantations. She touched my arm and flinched. "This is not just clothing," she whispered. "This is possession through memory." I didn't understand. She explained that strong grief, when sewn into physical objects, could become a vessel for the soul that could not move on, especially when the person died unwillingly or too suddenly. Shai had left, but not peacefully. His longing to stay, combined with the sentimental energy of his wardrobe, had turned every thread into a tether, and I was the replacement. His unfinished life had found a host. The only solution, she said, was to unbind the memory, to let go. But that meant destroying the wardrobe and everything inside it. Aunt Dahlia hesitated. She begged Sionang for another way, but the woman shook her head. "If you wait longer, the stitching will reach her heart. When that happens, you will never get her back." That night, we returned home. Aunt Dahlia didn't speak. She only entered Shai's room silently. I stood in the hallway, watching as she opened the wardrobe one last time. She touched each piece with her hand trembling. Then she took them all, even the light blue dress, and brought them outside. We built a small pyre in the backyard. The fire took quickly. The clothes hissed, then shrieked, as if releasing something buried deep. A foul wind blew through the flames, curling around us like a final embrace. And for a moment I saw him, Shai, not the stitched ghost from my dreams, but my brother. As I remembered him, standing tall, smiling, he didn't say anything. He just watched as the fire burned his things. Then he looked at me and nodded. Then he was gone. The next morning, the stitches were gone. My skin was smooth again, my eyes clear. I wept, not from fear this time, but from something else. Relief and goodbye. We sealed Shai's room permanently. Papa never asked why. Maybe some things are better left between the grieving. I still think of Shai. I still see his smile in my dreams. But now they're peaceful. There are no threads, no needles, just the memory of a brother who loved his clothes too much and stayed just long enough to say goodbye. Even now, I avoid light blue dresses, just in case.